everybody, welcome to our next webinar, and I am joined here with Elizabeth Ashley, the Secret Healer. So I met Elizabeth back in last year, all the way back in last year, when Elizabeth organized an online summit for essential oils, and it was really, really fantastic, and I loved it so much I contacted her to say how much I was enjoying it, and then we've just been connected ever since. So I'm really thrilled that she's going to be talking to us today. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for giving up your time to speak to our IFPA members and those not quite yet joined. So thank you so much. So do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
What a lovely welcome. And thank you.
Welcomes. I'm very welcoming.
So nice to see you.
It's always good to see you.
Oh, so yeah, it's been a long time since the summit, and so I've been in hiding for a little while, working on some work about pain. Brilliant. And it's really nice to be able to share that with you. So if it's all right with you, I'll talk a bit about my background, but I put on some slides. Is it all right with you to share that?
You're so organised. You're like, oh, it's just a little something I did earlier.
Well, organised, I'm menopausal, so I forget everything. So one moment, please. Oh, if I was organised, I'd be at the beginning. 1 second.
That's all right.
It's
looking good.
The screen.
Brilliant.
Me, who am I? So this is a nice picture of me. And I am author of the Secret Healer series, and that's a series of 20 books about aromatherapy, and I'm very lucky to have been able to secure 12 Amazon category #1 bestsellers with those. I secured my diploma of aromatherapy way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth in 1993, and I was very lucky to actually have been born into an aromatherapy family, because my mom is a lady called Jill Bruce, and she was one of the founder members of the IFPA, and back in 93 she ran one of the biggest schools in the country, which was recognised and accredited to not only the IFA but also IFPA as it was then. And so yeah, I did my diploma with her, and she also had a manufacturing company where she would make creams and lotions, and we would go off around the country to craft fairs and to agricultural shows, and literally treat hundreds of people a day for things like rheumatism, arthritis, hay fever with these little pots of cream. And it was very different then. Nobody had really heard about aromatherapy. So if you said to somebody, oh, take the headache cream and rub it on your forehead, they go, what? Rub it on your head? Which of course makes a great deal more sense than taking a pill. And we would understand that now, but back then it was a whole different world. So I took my diploma in 93 and then became advanced practitioner in 94, and then did various other qualifications in medical dowsing, medical astrology, and then went on and was awarded the Business Excellence Award through Business Link.
Brilliant.
But at that time, it was becoming very, very stifling working in the family business. And so I decided to make a break, and I came out of aromatherapy pretty much altogether and broke into recruitment. I worked as a recruitment consultant for 13 years, which is really where I got my business grounding from. It's cold, hard, competitive edge selling. And I loved it, but it was exhausting. And in 2008, not only did I fall pregnant with my youngest child, but I also developed a blood clot in my lungs, and which meant that I couldn't speak anymore. And so I had to obviously come off the phones there, off the telephones, and went on long-term sick, had Dexter, and had to find a way to earn some money. So I started doing some ghostwriting and did lots of ghostwriting contracts. Started off with one that was about cheesecakes, recipe book for cheesecakes. And then somebody happened to say, oh, I need somebody to do a bit of work about aromatherapy. Know anything about it? I thought, I know a little bit, yeah. And And it was only when I started to do these aromatherapy assignments that I realised that not only did I know a little bit, I actually knew a huge amount. And so I did quite a lot of ebooks for people. And after I'd had 7 Amazon #1 bestsellers for other people, my friends kind of hit me over the head and went, that's enough, stop being silly, start writing for yourself. And that's what I did. And so I launched my books way back in 2014. I launched 6 altogether. And in 2015, the National Association of the Holistic Aromatherapy in the States asked me to become their UK director. And so from there, my business has grown, and so has my studies. And more recently, I've done several courses with various universities about pain. With the University of Minnesota, I worked on preventing chronic pain. Also done Introduction to Neuroscience with the University of Chicago, and Cognitive Behavioural Therapy for back pain with the University of Oxford. So apart from that, I'm also a regular contributor of many articles into magazines, different trade journals, including Holistic Therapist magazine, where I don't usually write about aromatherapy, I write about business. And then last year, as you say, I got involved in a project with a Hungarian aromatherapist, actually, Gergely Halodi, and we organised the Beyond the Essential Oil Recipe Summit, where we had over 60 of some of the best aromatherapists in the world talking about aromatherapy. And so if I click here, you'll see Gergely. And now I'm going to bust a myth, because I think everybody thinks Gergely is my husband, but he's not. So this is my husband. This is Daryl, and my youngest son, Dexter, who was the cause of the blood clot, bless his heart, and now is a cause of many stresses, but also giggles. My middle son, as you can see, is much older. This is him graduating from Oxford with his Masters in Maths, and my daughter graduating with her psychology degree. My mum, who we talked about. And also, this is my alter ego, Wiki Witch, who gets involved if I think any of my marketing's becoming a bit saccharine sweet, and she derails all of my endeavours. And this is her saying, do not buy the Rose book. So, and this is Ludlow. This is where you can find me. And for those who don't know where that is, near to Wales, and this here is an area of outstanding natural beauty, as you can see from the picture. That's absolutely true, these beautiful Shropshire Hills. And this little spot here, that's my house. And this is my office. This is the Secret Healer's shed, and where all the videos take place and all my plants for distillation are grown. So the reason I was wanted to talk today was about pain, because I think that a huge number of people suffer from pain. In fact, shockingly, 20% of adults in the world are suffering chronic pain at any one time. And we go and talk to the doctors, and I've deliberately picked this picture because the doctor does seem to be a very nice woman. You know, she's listening, she's saying all the right things. But a friend of mine, very dear friend actually, recently contracted or developed, I should say, fibromyalgia, and he went to his doctor, and the doctor said, well, you need to manage your stress. And yeah, that's what she says. And this lady, the same as my friend, thinks, well, how very trite. What on earth does that mean in the scope of my life? How do I do that? And so she might be confused, she might be angry, or she might be upset. But either way, she doesn't really understand how stress can make a difference to the pain that she's feeling. And it's an interesting thing, because we used to think that there was a pain gateway, but now that we understand that's outdated really. What happens is the body actually responds to what's going inside of the body in terms of sensors, in terms of environment, and it's often if you compare things like somebody who has pain from cancer to chronic pain, the person with cancer does have quite a good correlation between the damage to the tissues to the pain that they're feeling. But there can be lots of other people who don't really have that much tissue damage, but they have huge amounts of pain, and it's partly to do with genetics, but a great deal to do with the environment that they find themselves in. So in terms of their stress, their mood, their beliefs, many different things, and these can be altered. So we're going to look at how can stress be making my pain worse? Because when I came to talk to my friend about it, and to be able to convince him that actually it wasn't rubbish, the doctor had said stress was having a bearing, I couldn't actually put together the physiology that said, well, this is specifically what has happened. And so that's what my research has been about most recently. So the objectives of today's webinar are to understand what we mean by chronic pain, to discover key nervous system physiology that influences pain, to understand how the brain creates pain, because I think a lot of people become quite incensed if the doctor implies that pain is all in their head, but actually the truth of the situation is that the brain actually creates the picture of pain, not actually, and I'm going to say your hand because I have RSA on my hand, so that's where my pain is. The pain doesn't come from this hand, it comes from the pictures that are being created in my brain. And to recognise just one specific way that stress upregulates pain, because there are many, so we're just going to concentrate on one in this webinar. And then we'll look at essential oils that can influence that particular area. So, what is pain? Well, I was really surprised when I asked people to talk on the summit, because I expected out of 60 speakers that at least one person would say that they wanted to talk about pain, but we had all manner of things from chemistry to menopause to autoimmune or beauty. Even somebody spoke about numerology of essential oils, but not a single person said pain. And I thought, well, that's fascinating, because it is one of the areas that we as aromatherapists do best, and the doctors themselves will say we don't have any answers to it. It's something that we can't really do anything about. Excuse me. But with aromatherapy, we have good answers. We can reduce pain quite quickly. And so I asked myself why that might be. And I like this quote a lot. So Professor of Anaesthetics says, well, pain is common, but it isn't sexy. And I think that that's very true, that if somebody's going into medical research, then probably this isn't going to be as exciting as curing cancer. So pain is defined as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. Now, this definition, I think, was made around about 1964. So it's old, but it does still stand true that it is unpleasant. It is to do with our senses, but also it involves our emotions a great deal. It might be to do with actual damage to the tissues, some that may happen, or actually it can be unidentified and there'll be very little tissue damage at all. And there's two different types of pain, and actually lots of different types of pain, because we've got neuropathic, nociceptic, that kind of thing. But we're going to look in terms of acute and chronic, because that's to do with time. So acute pain might be you've stubbed your toe or you've broken your leg. It might be a small thing or a large thing, but it's to do with the amount of time that it lasts. And that is to do with an injury. It will be short term. And at the end of that, hopefully, there is going to be a healing process. But it will be accompanied by anxiety and distress, because obviously you have broken your leg, so that's distressing. But at the end of that, you'd hope that the pain had gone. And actually, there's a very scary statistic that says if you're still in pain after a month from some kind of injury, that the chances are you will continue to be in pain, and it will continue on to chronic pain, because it's not necessarily something that's happened with the tissues, it's external factors that are making that pain. So we've got quite a long gap between that month to 6 months, because when we get to 6 months, we'll say, right, okay, it's been hanging around now, it's not responding to treatment. We might also see examples of things that may not necessarily be to do with tissue damage, like fibromyalgia or osteoarthritis, and they're hanging around. And what we're going to see then is a very different kind of mood shift. These aren't going to be, I have to be careful about hurting that. It's depression, you know, depression, anxiety are coming in. And these have a really enormous impact. So socially, in this country, as a nation, we spend out £100 billion per year on pain. So that would be things like prescriptions, social benefits, long-term sick pay. And actually that figure is cumulatively more than cancer, more than heart disease, and also diabetes combined. So even those three together doesn't match the amount of money we spend on pain. And this is a huge figure, but I think it's really worth pointing out that the social impact is massive, but the personal impact on a person who is suffering from pain is huge. So they are likely to start feeling very down, depressed. They start to limit their abilities to go to do exercise. Eventually, a lot of people can no longer go to work. It becomes an area of distress within families. It becomes a tender point where there's a lot of arguments. You feel like people don't understand you, and it can be emotional breakdown, relationship breakdown, or even, if somebody's lost their job, perhaps losing their house, and it's a huge and critical thing. And so what's very interesting, though, is one of the things that affects pain hugely is one's belief about it. So on the most fundamental level, it might be that you fell over and your mum picks you up and she makes a huge fuss about it. Oh, my darling, oh, come here, you mustn't do that again. Don't get doing that again, you'll hurt yourself. Is very different to a person who goes, oh, kiss it better, off you go. We develop these big beliefs. And over time, we might start to develop beliefs like, well, it's dreadful. It's hopeless. I am going to live my whole life like this. There's nothing I can do. I've got no control over it. This pain is overwhelming. It's like a demon within me. And the more you deal with people working in pain, the more you start to hear this idea of somebody being consumed by a demon. It's taking over their life. And so in aromatherapy, like other complementary therapies, we see disease and dis-ease as very different things. So we say, we think about emotional well-being as a sort of an indicator of health, as opposed to the doctor's BP, BMI, and all of those things. And we look at things more holistically. So you'll start to see the mind, body, spirit ideal coming out. But body-mind medicine is becoming a lot more mainstream. And what we'll see in this lecture now is how mainstream medicine has looked at these emotional connections to see how we can relate to physical pain. So this is quite a new idea. And this guy here is René Descartes. And in 1641, he proposed the theory of mind-body dualism. He said, because the mind was spatial and indistinct, then it probably existed in isolation from the body, and so therefore the two could exist in separation. And it's at this point really that medicine goes off and splits. So there you have physical and psychology. But he also said something very interesting. His thing that he's most famous for is I think, therefore I am. And in some ways, that completely undoes his Cartesian thinking, because I think, therefore I am in pain. So physical pain is complex and subjective. So as I said, it can be affected by genetics, but also by sensory, which is the area we're going to look at today, but also affective ideas. So in terms of how your mood is at the time, how you feel about being motivated to go to work, cognitive dimensions. So for example, we can get distracted by doing nice things, or people who catastrophize do feel pain more acutely. Mood, beliefs. Mind-body medicine, just to be clear, the kind of research that I do is called psychoneuroendocrinology, and there are lots of people who think that it's quite a modern thing, but actually this year the association is 50 years old, so it's older than me. Not many things on earth are older than me these days, but that is. And psychoneuroimmunology is the idea that stress will make infections worse, was first coined in 1979. And so these are easy things to be able to articulate, really. We've all heard the stories of old people who have been together for 60 years. She dies, he dies months later from a broken heart. And it's, you know, it's a strange phenomenon, but it's definitely happens a lot. Most of us, I think, are aware of the connection between the emotions and our gut, and how things like irritable bowel syndrome can be affected by stress. Physicians are very clear that if somebody has a positive mindset about the idea of getting over cancer, then they've got a much better fighting chance than somebody who immediately thinks that they're defeated. HIV actually is proven to spread through the body faster if somebody is stressed than somebody who doesn't. Skin complaints, obviously, we know about eczema, psoriasis getting worse, and also asthma. Quite often, if you're stressed, you'll have to grab your inhaler often. And people who have had surgeries heal faster if they are not experiencing anxiety. Those who are suffering from anxiety and depression are expected to have a slower healing time than somebody who does. So this idea of the nervous system, this split between psychology and the physical body that Descartes outlined. Let's think about the word nervous, because the word nervous pertains to the nerves. That's what it means. And nerves are in the physical body, but nervous is definitely mental. So we're getting a bit confused here, aren't we? We're in two different domains. So if we had a problem with sciatica and somebody had definitely got a pinched nerve, where would we begin to deal with the problem with that? Would we say it's a nervous problem with their emotions, or is it to do with the physical body nerves? And if we're talking about that, what actually is the central nervous system? Well, I'll answer that because it's relevant for the next bit. So we have several different nervous systems. The central nervous system is the spinal cord and the brain. The nerves that go through the rest of the body are called the peripheral nervous system. Whoopsie daisy, bad hand. Sorry. So it's interesting to think about what the functions of this nervous system are, because we take it for granted, I think. So it has 4 functions. The first is movement. We use those nerves to move the body, don't we, to send signals. Perception, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about perception in a moment, but how much we perceive we are in pain is another mechanism of how much we can perceive a fragrance in aromatherapy, how we perceive what we see, we hear. All of that comes under the nervous system. It's also to do with homeostasis. So when I wrote my Holy Basil book, I talked about Holy Basil being adaptogen, in that it brings the body back into homeostasis. And I kind of only thought of that in terms of blood sugar, heart rate, that kind of thing. But homeostasis is to do with how much oxygen's in the body, whether we stand upright, many, many different things. And all of that is to do with the nervous system, and even to do with the rhythms. So rhythms of day and night, rhythms of the passage of time from being an infant to a teenager to be an old person. All of that is to do with homeostasis. And it's also to do with our abstract functions, so cognition, how we think about things, but also our emotions are obviously involved in the nervous system. So it's a very, very complex thing. The movement is completely driven by the brain, whether that would be voluntary or unconsciously. And an everyday example or minute-to-minute example in my house is standing on Lego. And if you stand on a piece of Lego, it is a voluntary movement, and it comes entirely from the emotions. We generate it from inside ourselves. We talked about perception earlier being a part of the nervous system, and perception is a very interesting thing because we think of it in terms of sensation, but actually it's completely distinct from sensation. Perception is what we consciously appreciate about that sensation. So if we smell a lavender oil and we breathe it in, it's only when it gets to the outer part of the brain, the cortex, that we perceive it, that we have any conscious appreciation of it. And as I say, perception is sight, hearing, smell, taste, sense of balance, and also our positioning in the world. So if you are a person who suffers with confidence and you think that perhaps you're not as good as somebody else, that's a perception. That comes from the nervous system, but also the physical positioning of me sitting in a very strange place in the living room today is a perception. So here we go, we're into the science. Have I lost you yet, by the way? You're very quiet there.
I'm here. I put myself on mute because I'm going, oh,
leave the O's on.
And when you said living in, you know, where you are, so close to the Welsh border, I was like, yeah, whoop, whoop.
Leave the sound
So it's probably best that I'm on mute. So I'm listening, but there is a lot of head nodding, and especially the Lego comment.
Leave the sound on.
Yes.
I feel like I'm sitting in the wilderness. So we've got the picture here of the nervous system, and we can see, as we said, the central nervous system is the spinal column, goes up the spinal column to the brain, and then we can see how it all comes out into the peripheral system. Now, this second picture, the blue and red, looks a bit like a strange Union Jack, is an illustration of how the information goes from pain to the brain and back down again. So what you're seeing here is what's called the dorsal horn. It's a part of the spinal cord, and you can see it has many different sections. Most relevantly, if we look at section 4 in blue, 4A, 4B, these are the parts that take sensory information to the brain. The brain then makes a translation of it, and then it comes back down, what number? 2. Down the right-hand side, via the red. So you can see that it's two very, very different systems. Blue takes the information up to the brain about what we're sensing, but it's the information that comes down the red section that gives us an indication of exactly how it feels to us.
Does this, Elizabeth, do you mind me asking a question?
Go for it.
Does this then transfer over, when you look at reflexology, I remember a reflexologist telling me once that 1 foot will signify the emotional side of a person. So when you press on the solar plexus point of 1 foot, if it's tender, that can relate to the emotional side. And then the other side would be more of a physical pain or emotional level, a physical level that they would be feeling through the solar plexus. Is that then transferred over to that? Because that would kind of make sense, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I'm not a reflexologist, but that would be very interesting if that was the case, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to find
I'll find a reflexologist.
Yes, I will ask Jane Lawson. She's my go-to about reflexology, or Laura Cantel.
Because that would match up, wouldn't it? If one side represents one side of the body, and then the brain is operating so differently, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, neurons or neurons. I spent 3 weeks going, well, what's a neuron if a neuron's a nerve cell? And I've now discovered that neurons and neurons are exactly the same thing. It just depends which side of the Atlantic that you're on. So,
tomato.
Yeah, it is, yeah. So, neurons. If you were looking at cells and you were looking at heart cells or gastric cells, it's about 5 different, maybe 10 different types of heart cells, gastric cells. You look at one, you've seen them all, really.
Yeah.
But neurons, there are hundreds of thousands of different ones of different shapes, different sizes. And so they all do very, very different things, and there's massive variations in size and shape, but they all have this kind of standard physiology, if you like, or anatomy, sorry. So this is my beautiful picture of a cell. So here we go. This little green bit is the cell body or the soma, and this is where the DNA of the cell is, and the mitochondria. So it's the powerhouse of the cell. This is what makes all the decisions and generates new cells if needed. And that's an important thing to remember. So remember that the cell body can be responsible for creating new neurons if need be. Okay, so we also have up here little trees. These are the dendrites, and these sense information from around about. So these are the ones that will sense if there are any kind of noxious stimuli, whether that would be pressure, whether we're being pinched, whether we've put our bag on, it's too heavy on our shoulder, whether we've put burnt our hand on something acid or hot or cold. All of that information is fed from the dendrites. This here is yellow is the axon, and this takes the information. So the dendrites take the information to the cell body, then the cell body transmits it down the axon via electrical signals into, and this is the end of the axon here, these are the synaptic terminals. So it's from the synaptic terminals that neurotransmitters are dispatched, because there are gaps between neurons. So if they want to get information from one neuron to another, we need to send something across the gap, and I always think of them like the chemical messenger pigeons. They relay information across, and what happens is, here we go, this is the synaptic terminal, a close-up. These here are the synaptic vesicles. These manufacture and store neurotransmitters, and they send them across what's called the synaptic cleft to the next neuron. So those of you who are interested in any cannabis medicine, this is one of the key areas where cannabis becomes interesting. So this here is what we call the presynaptic terminal. This is the postsynaptic terminal, and most messages go from pre to postsynaptic terminal. There's a system called the endocannabinoid system, which is what cannabis locks to, which actually sends information backwards. So this, if we imagine these are dopamine and serotonin, for example, this would go, oh, we got too much dopamine, stop sending that, and that controls it. And it might say, no more serotonin, please. And so that will modulate how much is being sent and stored from the synaptic vesicle. So if this endocannabinoid system is broken, then you have this strange anomaly where you have strange neurotransmission. And just to be clear, neurons communicate with other neurons, but they also communicate with cardiac muscle and glands and muscles. So this postsynaptic cell isn't always a neuron. It might be a cardiac muscle or a gland or what have you. So then, so this is how all of the information is getting sent backwards from the glands too.
It just reminds you, the human body is just so amazing, isn't it?
Unbelievably amazing. And this is where it gets really exciting, actually. So actually, I only received this slide from my illustrator 5 minutes before we started. So
oh, see, you're such a pro. You are just like, I had all this prepared pages.
Yes. So what we're going to see on this heat and freeze one, we can see these like little trumpets here. These are what are called trip channels, TRPV, and they sense heat, they sense cold, but they also sense acids in the system or pressure. So if you bang your hand, then these send that information. So what they do is these various, whether it's hot or whether it's cold, will activate this cell. They will send the information up. Here's your dendrites, look, go into the cell body, and that will open what's called an ion channel. And when the ion channel opens, there you have an electrical signal that goes through to trigger the nerve to do something, the neuron to do something.
Yeah.
You can see on here we go cell body, spinal cord, up to brain. The only thing is, when these activate, like any other chemical process, you have waste products. Okay, so if you've got like a point of injury, that will say to the area, right, it will attract things like macrophages, mast cells, platelets. They all come to the area of inflammation to try to heal it, but they too have byproducts. So the more of this that goes on, the more nasty substances that you've got that build up this this idea of inflammation. But what's also interesting is when we go back to these like trumpet trip cells too, if you think along this green line, if you imagine that these are nerve fibers, and along each of these nerve fibers there are sensors, okay? The more stimulation we get from these nerve fibers, the body actually goes, oh, I need some more sensors. Oh, we'll leave these open as well so that they can get more. So the body hasn't got this gated complex that we always thought it had, that it kind of switches pain on and off. It's adapting all of the time, and it's responding to what it thinks is danger to protect the body all the time and winding it up. So this is just probably a bit of an aside, but just so that people understand. So neurons talk through electrical language. It's not the same as the electrical language your hairdryer uses. It uses electrons. So molecules have a charge, and these are ions. And the number of protons is not equal to the number of electrons. So that would mean that one has lost a molecule, or it's gained one, so it's become positively or negatively charged, and it's these electrons that make the difference to send electrical energy around the body. The molecules are inside of the cells, which have cell membranes, and the membrane is mainly made up of fat, so it's like oil, and inside is water and outside is water. And because oil and water don't mix, it's impossible for anything to get through this membrane unless there's a gateway, and we call these gateways ion channels. So if we just go back to the preceding one again, if we have a stimulation here, it will open an ion channel and it will send the electrical impulse that way. Are we going backwards, forwards? So what I want to specifically talk about is the nerve fibers. So nerves are made up of thousands of different types of fibers, and we're going to look at 3 in particular today. Yeah, so click, 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 click. This big one here, this big fat one, these are what come out of the muscles, and if I move my arm like that, these are the big fat ones that say move that muscle now, right? And so they've got a large axon, but they are very, very well insulated by myelin. And for anybody that doesn't know, myelin is an insulation to the nerve that doesn't necessarily keep it warm. That's not its function, like insulation would be in the house. It's to make sure that it insulates the signal. So if there's lots of myelin, then a signal can't get out, and what it means is it sends signals incredibly quickly. And we know that these big fat ones, these 1s and 2s, the movement ones, have a conduction velocity of between 80 to 100 meters per second. So we move things before we can even consciously appreciate that we're doing it, really. But as we go down, these nerve fibers get thinner. So the one that is in charge of touch is the A beta fiber, and as you can see, it has still got quite a large axon, still got quite a lot of myelin, although less than the movement ones, so it doesn't go as fast. It will move at between 35 to 75 meters per second. The one that mentioned that is pain and temperature, 5 to 30 meters per second, and the one at the bottom, the very thinnest, that has virtually no myelin, is to do with itching and pain, and we find this really in free nerve endings. So I want to put that into a context. So I'm sitting right next to the worst weapon in our house, which is the wood burner. At least once a week, I'll put my hand on the wood burner and forget to use a cloth, and it will be on fire, and I'll go, ow, 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 ow. So what we've got there is the movement is the fastest. We move it away before we've even realised what's happened. So that's your big fat one. Then the touch, we move our touch away, and then we perceive the pain. And then afterwards we have this throbbing pain that goes, oh, you silly cow, why did you do that? That hurts. And so these A delta ones, the pain and temperature ones, these have a different kind of pain sensation to the C fibers. So A delta will feel like a sharp stabbing pain, but a C fiber has a dull aching pain. So immediately, if you start to talk to somebody about how their pain feels, you're starting to get an understanding of which fibers it is that are doing causing the problems. For the most part, though, most of the patients that you will see will have an issue with the C fibers, because what we're going to see in a moment is this has a problem with the way it's conducting information to the brain. So if we have a look here, we've got 2 illustrations that look the same. We've got normal sensitization at the top, and we've got where it's going a little bit wrong at the bottom, and this is oversensitization. So here we've got the trip channels. We're saying, right, heat, cold, mechanical pressure can send an information down the nerve. It gets to the cell body, and we get a sensation of pain. What we've also got here is the same situation, but we've got a branch. Can you see? So if we imagine, it's easier to do it with my hands than do it on the screen. So if we imagine that we've got the A delta fibers, and in a normal situation, I'm stroking my hand and that will not hurt. But with somebody who's got fibromyalgia, for example, that's absolutely
agony.
Really agony.
Yeah.
So what's happened is this signalling here, this branch has gone astray. So most of the time, the normal situation is that that's quiet, right?
Yeah.
But we found now that because that cell actually has a branch, some things will trigger it to do that. And when it does that, it doesn't become an understanding of touch any longer. It immediately becomes a pain signal. So what this idea of being quiet, the quiescence requires, is to have two different things at that terminal. It needs to have adequate levels of GABA, the neurotransmitter GABA, and also enkephalins. And to clarify, if anybody doesn't know what enkephalins are pretty much the same thing as endorphins. They are opioids in the body, but enkephalins block the pain signals in the spinal cord, whereas endorphins are in the brain. So in other words, the enkephalins stop the pain message from transmitting to the brain. Okay, so if we haven't got those enkephalins, then we are likely to get the pain. Now, one of the things that struck me as interesting is when somebody's in pain, one of the first things that they start to do on this cycle into decline is to limit the amount that they do day to day.
The movement patterns. Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing that gives you the best amount of enkephalins into the body is exercise.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. So here we see the normal, and then we can see how it will become very, very sensitized to touch.
So you mentioned GABAs at the beginning of that block then. So a lot of my clients that have autoimmune disease, they get put on gabapentin a lot to try and manage the pain. Is that, again, a blocker then?
So gabapentin, I think, is what's called an agonist, which means it works to make GABA better, as I recall it.
Yeah.
But I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it works in your favour.
Yeah.
We'll look at GABA itself in more detail in a minute. I'll come back to that. But I think that they're probably on exactly the right thing to help them there. What I wanted to show was we've got we've seen how it's sending a pain signal, but I wanted to show how the different fibres go to different parts of the brain. So remember how I said that it'll be that dull aching pain that's the C fibre.
Yeah.
So the C fibre goes into, this is the dorsal horn.
Yeah. Which
is here.
Yeah.
In the spinal cord, right? So the C fibre goes into the second layer.
Yeah.
To the substantia gelatinosa.
I'm glad you're saying that and not me.
Try it again.
Say it 3 times really fast.
Gelatinosa. I can't do that again. And then the A delta fibres come much, much further in. They come into this lower part of the dorsal horn now.
Yeah.
If I turn over the page. It's where they go from there that's interesting, right? So the A delta fibres from there go to the thalamus, and then they go to the somatic sensory cortex, which is here, right? And here, this is involved in understanding the location of the pain, right? So we can see that on this one. So for example, we immediately go, oh, it's my finger that hurts.
Yeah.
But the C fibres, these long aching ones, they're going to a completely different place. They go to the thalamus, but then they go off to a different part here, the ventral medial forebrain.
Yeah.
So what does that bit do? Well, that's involved in decision making and regulating our emotions, but it also controls our feelings of risk and fear.
Okay.
So our body is immediately playing tricks on us, because the longer that it goes on, we have this pain, the more it goes, you need to be careful, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that, you're going to hurt yourself. No, I don't think you should push yourself.
So when you come into a movement pattern then, because obviously I work as a Pilates teacher, I'm working a lot. So on a Monday morning, I run a Pilates class that is specific for pain management. And what I try and teach them is that the expectation of pain will create tension in the muscle, which will then enhance the pain.
Yes.
What we have to do is focus on breath, getting them to breathe, and maybe even distracting the brain with counting down from 6 as you move, and picturing the numbers as well. So it's providing a bit of a distraction so that the body then doesn't start fearing a risk of pain through the movement, and then creating tension, which then enhances the pain.
That's fascinating.
And it works. Honestly, it really, really does work.
So there you can see it in action there.
Yeah, that's amazing. That kind of just cements what it is. So actually, it's almost like I know what I'm doing. You knew.
It's like me, I'm never more shocked when that happens.
I know. It's like, oh my gosh, it works.
But actually, so you've put this far better than I could, actually. So if we interpret that, we say the brain doesn't only act as a passive receiver of these sensory messages, it's interpreting them.
Yeah, and it's protecting as well, isn't it?
Exactly. And so and the thing is that the brain doesn't actually recognize the signal of pain. It actually recognizes it as danger.
Yeah.
So consistently it's creating a situation where it goes, no, don't do that, no, stop, that was dangerous. And so what's really fantastically interesting is that probably the most important thing you can teach somebody is the cognitive mindset behind it, that they can control this pain. And it's through the emotions, and it's through the mood, and what better ways to do that than using essential oils.
And actually, and just to not be fearful of the pains that I teach some of my clients in the Pilates, it's that pain signal. It's okay. There's no need to be like, oh God, pain. Just pull out there and tense up. It's actually just being really curious about that. Well, where am I feeling that? What kind of pain is it? Just reaffirming what you were saying, just what kind of pain is that? And is that pain localized? Does it transfer? Is it here? Is it there? Does it move anywhere else? And trying not to be judgmental, oh, this is so much worse than yesterday, or, this is going to hang around for ages, because that then creates tension in the body, which then exasperates the pain. But just to be curious, that's interesting. I'm feeling pain there. Well, that's nice. How, where does that extend to? How does that feel? Is it throbbing? Is it sore? Is it sharp? All those things. And just to try and take the fear out of it, because the fear is what creates the tension through the muscles then, and makes us lock up and go into protective mode.
I think you're absolutely right. And I also think that what you said there, when you said about it'll hang around for ages and it won't go away.
Yeah.
You're into that catastrophizing that we were talking about here, and you're immediately onto this downward spiral.
And then emotionally, what that does then, oh my God, this is going to be my life forever. I'm always going to have this pain. No, the facts are there's nothing to support that as a fact. So
it's
that
just,
can't
it's just an opinion. It's
right now. It's just moment right now.
So I just wanted to go back about the questions about GABA, really. So GABA has two major receptors, GABA A and GABA B. GABA A results in sedation, relaxation, reduced anxiety, and short-term memory impairment. So the more that we can trigger this, the better we're going to feel. We're going to be more relaxed. We're going to be less anxious. And we're not going to remember as many things as acutely. And pain memory is a real thing. So somehow it seems to lock into the memory. So imagine somebody hurt themselves by bending down at work.
Yeah.
The pain heals normally and it goes away. they might bend down and pick a pencil up at home and it won't hurt, but then they bend down and pick a pencil up at work and it does hurt. And this idea of this memory actually then sets up a new sensitization pathway as well. And as far as I know, we don't really understand how that happens, but it certainly does happen. So just a point there, it says there are many unlicensed products that might influence GABA. No, we're not talking about the gabapentin, we're talking about the ones that you can get off the supermarket shelves.
eBay.
Yeah, exactly. But actually, GABA supplements don't pass the blood-brain barrier, so they're not. So it's money fraud, right?
Effective.
And of course, things like gabapentin, as I understand it, one of the main problems with stimulating the GABA receptors too often is it becomes a dependency issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as well as essential oils, we can increase GABA through hypnosis, yoga, exercise and meditation. I should have put Pilates.
Yes, you should. Unbelievable.
Fact. Sorry, darling girl. So I thought it was interesting to look at some of the main essential oils that I use for GABA. So valerian root positively modulates through several of the GABA-A receptor subunits. So of course, there's never any surprises when you look at these. You know what they do. Valerian sends you to sleep. Yeah. It's also very calming. So of course, and we've got the proof behind that. Yeah. Rosmaric acid increases GABA levels by indirectly inhibiting the enzyme 4-aminobutyric transaminase. That couldn't do it again if I tried. That converts. I'm so impressed. I know. I'm that. Cool. Other people go out and like go to dances or go dating. I learn. You learn how to pronounce things. I don't really. But it stops it converting into L-glutamate. And anybody who knows anything about neurotransmitters knows that anything to do with glutamate is problematic. Okay. It overexcites the system. We get headaches, we get memory loss, we get bad tempers. And because I hate anything to do with rosemary oil, I use Melissa for rosmaric acid, but I'm sure that... Can I ask why you hate anything to do with rosemary? Yes, I can. Because I don't trust rosemary. There's too much conflicting information out there. So when I trained, we were told it increases blood pressure, that it's a neurotoxin, that you shouldn't use it if you have psychosis, and it's not good for seizures. Yeah. But then now Tisserand's come out and said all of that's untrue. Yeah. It's Valnay's research on herbalism, and because there's quite a lot of psychosis in my family and high blood pressure, I go, I'm not using it. Just find something else. So I just, it's a well-known fact that me and rosemary, we don't trust each other. Plus, you know how you rosemary? Would you have it? Oh yeah. And I do use it if there's somebody who has none of those issues. Yeah. Then I use it. Yeah. But also, you know how certain oils have got personalities. Yes. Well, all oils have got personalities, and you get on with some personalities. Yes. Well, you know how you have two alpha females? Yes. Me and Rosemary are both alphas. She's too bossy. Yeah. I want to take the lead. Yeah. I definitely see that about Rosemary. Definitely. Yeah, she's like a smack in the teeth. So not somebody you want to have a coffee with. No. And she's just kicks your ass. I think, no, she bores me. And when let me think, who was it? On the summit, Martin Henglein, who is a German guy who works in France, he did this lovely talk about the fragrance cycle and how different oils work better at different times of the day. Yeah. And he convinced me that I would be all right working with rosemary early in the morning, where I was a bit, and I needed a bit of a kick. And he's right. I can use it then.
Yeah.
But actually, she's never going to be the friend that I ring up and say, let's go for coffee. Quite rightly so. No. So, but Melissa, I do love Melissa. She's like sunshine, isn't she?
See, I don't like Melissa.
Oh, gosh, why?
I don't know. I just don't.
Oh, I love it.
I have the Melissa Hydrolat. I really like the Melissa Hydrolat, but the essential oil, no. Oh, no.
Oh, isn't it funny how people are different?
Yeah.
And so my next question then, the next one on the list, have you ever worked with Monarda fistulosa?
No, I've never heard of a Monarda fistulosa.
Oh,
Tell me about Monarda. Is she a friend? Are we going for coffee?
Not only are we going for coffee, but she has many corners of my garden. I first discovered Monarda accidentally when I was researching my bronchitis book, which I was doing because my lungs were so bad at that point.
Were they?
Horrific. And so I'd moved to Ludlow and I had to walk up, well, I still have to walk up a hill that I call Mordor. It's so steep. And as you can imagine, with dodgy lungs, that
Mordor.
It is Mordor. And Dexter will tell you it's worse on a Thursday than the other day. And we hate it. But I couldn't get up there without really coughing my guts up. So I was like, I've got to take this in hand.
Yeah.
And in the research, I came across that they discovered that you could actually heal the scarring in your lungs with Timol and geraniol.
Right.
So, oh, that's exciting. So
right.
Thyme and geranium, fantastic. I thought, I wonder what's the oil with the highest levels of those present?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
So I looked it up in Tisserand and Young and found that there's this oil called Monarda.
Yeah.
And it's actually one of the main Native American Indian medicines.
Oh, okay.
And it grows in like a weed along the waterways in the States. And there's lots of different chemotypes of it. But they have like, what can I think of that's similar? You know how carnations have got almost like fluted petals?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the States, hummingbirds come down and suck the nectar out of Monarda. Now, that's not enough to make you fall in love.
Yeah, that makes you love it straight away, doesn't it?
So I used Monarda for 2 weeks and immediately I'd stopped coughing.
No way.
It's incredible. It's so good for coughs.
How did you use it?
So actually, now I hardly ever use the essential oil. I've got so many different chemotypes of the plant in the garden. I just pick the leaves and make a tea of them.
Brilliant.
But just when I was using it for the essential oil, I inhale it, or if I've got a really bad cough because I've got a cold, just oil.
Yeah.
A 3% dilution with sunflower or whatever's in the kitchen. Rub it on the chest. Fantastic. And it's so strengthening. And it's just, in the Native Americans call it elk medicine. So the elk has tremendous amounts of stamina. And bizarrely, the elks really love other female elks. So the female elks have this huge society of support network with the
female support. They've got their tribe.
Yeah, exactly. The tribe. That's exactly right. And so if somebody is having a hard time, one elk, or the same happens in the Native American people's communities, they go off into the wilderness, they go and do their own thing, nobody bothers them. Nobody asks why. They just patiently wait for them to come back. And so they know that when they come back, their support mechanism is there. And that's absolutely Monarda medicine.
Is it?
Bringing the people to you that need the help. It is. It's beautiful. And it's called bee balm, and it smells like, it's called bee bergamot. And it smells like bergamot, exactly like bergamot.
Bee bergamot.
Bee bergamot, yeah.
Okay. I'm writing this down. I'm going to go shopping this afternoon.
So, so that has thymoquinone, as does black seed oil, spelling mistake, Nigella sativa, it should say on the Latin name.
Okay.
Jasmine, also has constituents that will affect the GABA receptors. The two that are probably the most popular are linalool and borneol.
Yeah.
And then also in matricaria, there's apenogene, which enhances GABA transmission through the benzodiazepine receptor. And also, as I was saying about the glutamate, it also calms the MDA glutamate receptors as well. So you've got a double whammy there, although only very weakly.
Yeah.
So that's my talk.
Oh, you're brilliant, you are.
Oh, that's a nice thing to say.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully it was interesting to you. Obviously,
really
that was only one mechanism. We look at about 10 different mechanisms in the course that I'm running.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the course that you're running?
Oh, well, a nice idea. So it's a completely online program, and it's 12 modules where we look at all different aspects of pain and the different ways of tackling pain.
Yeah.
So each module drips through every fortnight. So it takes about 6 months to complete the course. So each module is then broken down into 3 further modules. So we have the integrative therapy, which is basically what we did today.
Yeah.
We have the essential oils. And then the third module is something that I feel very strongly about. I think that when a lot of therapists leave their diploma, they finish their certification, tremendous aromatherapy knowledge, but they don't really have much knowledge of how to take it out into the world and make a business from it.
Right.
And so the third part of the module is completely business focused.
Okay.
So what we do is we build a business model around the subject. So we tackle everything from writing articles to social networking to how to phrase sales conversations, and they're all obviously come from my knowledge of working in the recruitment industry for such a long time.
Yeah.
By the end of it, hopefully, not only should you be able to sort of talk to the man in the street about his pain, but you should also be able to go to the doctors and say, how about sending me some referrals? And have a strong enough business profile to be able to do that.
That would be amazing, wouldn't it? That would be so amazing.
And so this will actually launches on April the 8th.
Okay.
And originally when I talked about it, I said that I was only taking 12 students because what I'd also offered was one-to-one training as an extra for people who wanted extra help with copywriting and stuff.
Yeah.
But given that the course is almost completely booked up and not a single person has asked for that one-to-one training, I'm no longer restricted by that. So I can take as many people who want to come on.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So if somebody's interested in doing the course and they want to join up after April the 8th, then we can do that. It's not a problem at all. In terms of cost, this is the very first time that the course has run. And knowing myself as I do, I envisage hiccups. So, normally, after this first rollout, it will be $997. And I always work in dollars because most of my readership is in the States. So it's about 850 quid. But this first intake I am doing for $775, which can also be paid over 3 installments if somebody is intimidated by that large cost.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much. I think that gives everybody, good insight into the course, and it looks really, really fantastic. So some of the stuff that we've covered today is as part of your course?
That's a very small part of module 4.
Brilliant. So it kind of gives everybody an idea of what the course will be like, but also it just gives us an idea of how to help people that come into our treatment rooms with pain, and how essential oils can be so useful in the management of pain and just providing people with such support, because they really do get to the end of their tether with the amount of medicines and the side effects of the medicines they put on, aren't they? So they are looking for alternatives So I think the more of us that are quizzed up on how to use essential oils to manage pain would be a really, really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Elizabeth, thank you so much for giving us the time and your content, and just for always being so fun, making learning so fun. Thank you so much.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. I've really enjoyed it, Karen.
Good. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I've enjoyed spending my morning with you, so thank you.
Very good. Lots of love, darling. Thank you.
To you, and hopefully see you soon.
Yeah.